Hello and welcome to the Collective Basketball Agreements podcast. I'm your host, Joe Manganiello, and we are talking about one of the best teams in the WNBA, the Las Vegas Aces. They did not win the championship last year, but they did win consecutive championships before that. And so a team that could make it 3 out of 4 rings, 3 out of 4 years in a row getting a ring. This is a big team to discuss when we break down these free agency recaps. I want to spend some time, though, talking about a topic which is, frankly, kind of difficult to talk about. But I think for my listeners and as I'm establishing this platform, I want to talk about why the Aces do not have a first-round pick this year. Because big picture, any veteran team, any team with aging stars, or to put it differently, you have A'ja Wilson, the best player in the world. Ideally, you have first-round picks of your own where you're not necessarily drafting in the top of the lottery, but you're able to infuse some young talent into your veteran team. And the Aces don't just lack a first-round pick this year, but they've actually missed out on first-round picks now for 2 years in a row. They haven't really had a good first-round draft selection since 2019 when they had the number 1 pick and they took Jackie Young. So I want to talk about this because if the Aces begin to decline, particularly as the WNBA enters into a very unknown period with 2026 and the specter of a new CBA, if the Aces fall off, I would argue it's because they ran out of draft capital and they weren't able to bolster the bottom of this rotation and add young talent to this roster. So let's get into it. 27-13 record a season ago. They were second in the Western Conference. They lost to the New York Liberty in round 2. I think it would have been really interesting if they had to play the Minnesota Lynx in the playoffs. They beat the Seattle Storm 2-0 in the first round, but then they lost to the Liberty in 4 games. I would have been really intrigued by a Minnesota-Las Vegas series. I would have picked Minnesota, and ultimately the Liberty were able to take care of them. Wasn't really the Aces' year, although they were still plenty good. 108 offensive rating, second in the W. A 101.2 defensive rating, that was 5th. A net rating of plus 6.8, 4th. Connecticut was the better defensive team, but I probably would have the Aces as 3rd best team last year. It made sense to me that they made it to round 2 and lost. That result makes sense to me. In terms of the financial fundamentals, they have 7 guaranteed contracts, 1 4th-year option on the books for Kirsten Bell, 6 unguaranteed contracts. So they don't have a roster spot as of today, but they do have some flexibility, some optionality at the bottom of the roster. Only $217,000 in cap space, however. So not a ton of wiggle room there. Shore things up. They have the number 13 pick in the 2025 draft and the number 35, but they do not have a first-round pick for the 2nd consecutive year. The WNBA officially rescinded their 2025 first-round pick due to salary cap violations. That penalty stems from a 2023 league investigation, which found that the Aces violated rules by promising impermissible benefits to players. This is separate from a 2-game suspension that Becky Hammon served last year. That was actually related to comments made allegedly to De'Erica Hamby about her pregnancy. So again, not an easy story to talk about. Certainly some pretty big allegations, and ultimately, what the WNBA decided happened. The timeline of events is crucial for understanding the situation. Hamby publicly accused the Aces of mistreating her after she announced her pregnancy, stating that the team questioned her commitment and handled her situation unprofessionally. However, the WNBA's investigation ultimately determined that while Hammond's comments warranted discipline, there was no violation of the league's player transaction rules in how the Aces traded Hamby. And we'll talk about that trade momentarily. Hammond has repeatedly denied that Hamby's pregnancy had anything to do with the Aces' decision to move on from her, stating in May of 2023, quote, "Hamby's pregnancy wasn't a problem, and it never was why we made that decision. We made the decision to move Hamby because we could get 3 bodies in her one contract, and we wanted to get 3 more people in. I think it's very evident with who we signed on why we made the move," end quote. One of the players the Aces signed with the freed up cap space was Candace Parker, a legend, Hall of Famer, a major addition, which helped Las Vegas repeat as WNBA champions. Hammond further explained, quote, "It came down to math in business. That's all it was. Nothing personal. I had a great relationship with Hamby the whole time, which is why she probably felt the way she did. It feels like a betrayal. But like I said, it's a crappy part of my job, but somebody's got to be the bearer of bad news," end quote. The Aces' loss of their 2024 first-round pick was unrelated to the league's disciplinary action, as it was part of a prior trade with the Sparks that sent Hamby and the pick to Los Angeles in exchange for an international player's rights and a second-round pick. But that deal did feel kind of funny because Hamby was such a good player. Ultimately, that deal, finalized before the WNBA completed its investigation, fueled speculation about the Aces' treatment of Hamby, though the league's penalty for cap violations was unrelated. Now, fast forward to today, and there is a layer of irony that the Aces' big addition was ultimately in a move where they traded out Kelsey Plum, who won multiple championships with the team, a very great player in her prime, and they traded Plum for Jewel Loyd, a star player who reportedly wanted out of the Seattle Storm franchise due to frustration with their situation and their practices. Now, Loyd joins an Aces team that has dealt with controversy in recent years. Meanwhile, Hamby, the player at the center of the Aces' mistreatment allegations, is now teammates with Plum in LA. And so ultimately here, I'm left to think with no first-round picks in either 24 or 25, and I think, some lackluster results in the draft ever since they drafted Jackie Young in 2019. It's interesting. Las Vegas remains fully committed to a win-now approach, prioritizing established stars over draft development. However, their controversial history and lack of young talent could pose challenges in sustaining their dominance long-term. And so the question, can the Aces continue their dynasty, win a third title in 4 years with their reloaded core of stars? They were the number 1 turnover offense, so they took very good care of the basketball. And that was despite Chelsea Gray missing time. Asia had arguably the best individual season in WNBA history with a 34.9 PER. It's outstanding. Jackie Young had a career high in assist percentage, 18.7 up to 27.1. So, that means that she was assisting on more than a quarter of her team's assisted buckets, a career high usage rate. Jackie Young's already 4th in franchise history with 24.4 win shares via Basketball Reference. Funny enough, that's ahead of Kelsey Plum. And ultimately, I think the decision to keep Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray as their backcourt and move Plum to a new market, bring in Jewel Loyd, who is incredible talent, one of the best scorers in the league, but somebody who I think can slot in and play her role. Everybody sacrifices a little bit when you have so much star power, Chelsea, Jackie, and Asia, plus Jewel Loyd. Ultimately, the Aces were able to add the number 13 pick in this deal where they send out Kelsey Plum. And I think they'll be able to get a good player. College basketball's never been better. WNBA draft's never been deeper. But the question is, can Las Vegas manage its salary cap and continue to grow its brand in such a competitive league? The W has changed a lot. And winning the championship in 22 and in 23, the league comes at you fast. And I'm not exactly sure. Will the Aces be the favorite to win the title in any of the upcoming seasons? A lot can change between now and 26. I would say that the Aces are somewhere below the title favorites for me. Maybe it'll be New York. Maybe it'll be Minnesota. I think Phoenix, Indiana, they got so much better. Seattle's pretty good. Vegas might still be third for me. I think it was telling that early in the season, Becky Hammon brought up that the vibe of the team was off last year. And in some ways, it almost felt like things fell off from training camp. In other words, they knew they weren't going to win the title just by how everything started. A'ja Wilson recently admitted as much in an interview with reporter Callie Finn. And so ultimately, I think, this is all context for why Vegas added players who really have something to prove. They traded 2 second-round picks to add Dana Evans. They signed Tiffany Mitchell for $101,000, age 30, someone who definitely is looking to establish herself as the WNBA salary cap is set to expand in future years. Can she play so well this year on a high-profile team that she can get a big multi-year contract in future seasons? We'll see what Megan Gustafsson can do in her age 28 year. Kia Stokes still around at center. Would love to see the young Elizabeth Kitley, now back from injury, young center. Maybe she can establish herself as a rotation player and turn some heads. I think Evans in particular is going to be really crucial for the Aces because she's a good shooter, 37.6% from 3. And would love to see her, kind of spotting up around A'ja Wilson, Chelsea Gray pick and roll actions and finding opportunities to add points that way for the Aces. So I think this team is going to be very good. Can they be great? Can they be great consistently? And what is the reputation and the culture of this team moving forward? Trading away a player as good as Kelsey Plum, even when you get Jewel Loyd in return, it does send some interesting messages. If the Aces underachieved this season, would they move Chelsea Gray a year from now? Other than A'ja Wilson, is there any untouchable players on this roster? What's the future of Jackie Young with this team? Is Becky Hammon guaranteed to be the coach of this team long term if they were to underachieve this year? So I'm very, very curious about this Aces season. They could rampage the league, especially on the offensive end, and win the championship, and I'll shut the hell up. But I think for now, again, I would probably slot them underneath the Liberty and Lynx, and I think teams like Seattle, Phoenix, Indiana are really pushing up on them, and we're going to find out. This is not, by the way, anything against A'ja Wilson, who, again, I think is very clearly the best player in the league, although Nafisa Collier is getting close for my liking. But I'm going to wrap it up there. I would love to get some feedback on, does anyone think that the Aces are definitely the favorite? Is there anyone lower on the Aces than me? Is anyone willing to go out on a limb and say the Aces are going to be a first-round exit team this year? But I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for supporting the Collective Basketball Agreements podcast. I'm your host, Joe Manganiello. Thanks for listening.